Good morning and welcome to this General Licensing Subcommittee hearing. First item on the agenda is appointment of chair. Can I ask for nominations for chair, please?
I'll nominate Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes?
Thank you, Jackie. Firstly, so many apologies for the delay. We've had a couple of issues today out of our hands, so we've just had to wait, unfortunately, but apologies. I'll just run through the agenda. So any apologies?
Councillor Bolton?
Thank you. Any late items? I have none. Any declarations of interest, please? No. So move on to item 5. An application for a variation to the premises licence at the Woodlands Hotel, Blenheim Parade, Alistry. So firstly, what I would like to do, as there's so many in the room, is do some introductions, and then I'll run through the procedure with everybody, if that's okay. So, I'm Councillor Alison Holmes and I'll be chairing the meeting this morning. We'll just get...
Manju Gurn, Solicitor for Derby City Council.
I'm Councillor Gaurav Pandey, member of the Licence Committee.
I'm Jackie Waring. I'm the Democratic Services Officer.
I'm Anne Walker. I'm representing the licensing team.
Alex Green, Gostrok Solicitors on behalf of the applicant.
I'm Guy Chipchase. I'm the licensing manager for Craft Union.
Penny Wheelhouse. I'm the landlady of the Woodlands Hotel.
I'm Kelvin Heath. I'm the DPS at the Woodlands Hotel. I'm Penny's partner.
My name's George Georgia. I'm the regional manager for the Woodlands Hotel.
Tim Rosier, local resident.
John Vickers, local resident.
Chris Limbert, local resident.
Maureen Limbert, local resident.
Ryan Halloran, resident.
Adrian Stevenson, I'm representing Laura Stevenson, who's a resident.
And Councillor Steve Hassel, I'm a councillor for Alistry.
Thank you, everyone. I'm terrible at names, so forgive me if I've forgotten all of that. So the procedure today is our licensing officer, Anne, will present the case to us, and then we can ask any questions of her for clarification, and then you will be afforded to ask questions for clarification through me. Then we will move on to any interested parties. So the ladies and gentlemen at the back will be able to state their cases. I think we will go in an order of where you're sitting to make it easier, if that's okay. And then we will be able to ask questions of yourselves for clarification purposes, okay? Then we will move on to the applicant. So then you will be afforded yourself to present your representations, and then similarly we will be able to ask questions of you for clarification purposes. Then I will ask each one to sum up in turn, the same order. Then you will be asked to adjourn to leave while we make our decision. The decision notice will be, Anne can't do tomorrow because she's not here, so if it's not today, it will be Monday. Decision notice will be sent out on Monday. Okay. Any questions on procedure?
Will the decision notice be emailed to us, or?
It will indeed, yes. It will be emailed to every interested party that's made a representation. We'll just check that Anne's got everybody's details.
Yes, where I've got an email address for you, you'll get an email from me. I know there's a couple of people who have sent in written representations, so they will be written to.
Okay, any further questions on the procedure so far? Okay, thank you. So, moving to Anne then for to begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. The licensing team received an application from Craft Union Pub Company Limited to vary the premises licence at the Woodlands Hotel on the 21st of October 2024. The variation is for an extra hour on the terminal hour for Thursday through to Saturday for the sale of alcohol, late night refreshment and indoor sports, and an update of selected conditions on Annex 2 on their existing licence. The proposed terminal hour is to be 0100 hours, but the other licensable activities are to remain unchanged. During the consultation period, the applicant agreed with the police to replace their current Annex 2 conditions with those listed in Appendix 2 in the information you have received. The licensing team also received 22 representations from other persons, and these can be found in Appendix 3 of the bundle, and are predominantly concerned with public nuisance and crime and disorder. I would ask the committee to consider the application and the representations received. The committee is obliged to have regard to the Licensing Act 2003, the guidance made under that Act, the Council's own licensing policy, and the Human Rights Act when making its decision. The options open to committee today are to grant the application as per the application, modify any of the conditions of the licence or the agreed conditions, or reject the whole or part of the application. Thank you, Chair.
I've just got one question, Anne, if I can ask. We've heard about some complaints being taken forward to the police. Have the licensing authority ever received any complaints about the venue?
Having checked the records for one of the people who've made a representation, we've had one complaint, and that was made in 2021.
Do you have any questions for Anne so far? Okay. So we will now move on to the interested parties. So shall we go from this gentleman? Sorry, I can't remember your name. If you'd like, if you just say who you are as you press the microphone. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Brian Halloran. I'm a resident adjacent to the car park of the Woodlands Hotel. Surprised that you say you've only had one representation of complaint in 2021, because I personally have been into the pub 4 or 5 times. I've written to the council.
Just to clarify, it was via the council, actual complaints to the licensing authority. That was.
And I have written to the council without response. So and that was in the last 12 months. That said, let's move on. My experience with the Woodlands mostly is late at night. I can hear the music at midnight. In fact, I've been out into the car park asking people to move on who have left glasses, litter, drug paraphernalia in the car park. I suppose my personal experience of the noise, based on, my hearing's not that good, but it's based on the music and the loudness of it and the beating of the bass in particular late at night and into the early hours is quite disturbing. Cars go out of the car park at speed and race up and down Blenheim. So the noise, the litter, the arguing and fighting that sometimes takes place, all of those happen when the licence is as it is now. So the thought of extending it to 1 o'clock or 1:30 in the morning, 7 days a week, or every day is affected. So my opinion is if it's like that now, when the licensing is 12 for 12:30, what's it going to be like when the licensing is going to be there till 1:30 in the morning?
Thank you. Just to clarify, it's the applications for Thursday, Friday and Saturday. Oh,
Mike's still on.
Thank you. Would you like to present your case? Yes.
Can I start by saying I actually suffer from Parkinson's, so I may be a bit unsteady in my speech and a bit shaky, but that's the reason. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. This is a completely new process to me, and I've learned quite a lot in the last couple of weeks, but I'm sure there's lots more to learn. First thing I've discovered is that the licence comes with conditions, which I knew nothing about, and the licence holder is required to uphold those conditions. Repeated failure, as I understand it, could potentially lead to prosecution or loss of licence. The second thing I've learned is that it's extremely unlikely that that would happen. Apparently, there have been no prosecutions in the last 10 years in Derby. Seems to me that there are at least two reasons for this. Either the conditions are being upheld, or eventually upheld, or because the conditions are not monitored well enough. Maybe the number of objections received indicate the latter may be a factor. This brings me to my third observation. The group most likely to be able to monitor the conditions are the local residents. And yet they find themselves almost sidelined by this very process, I have to say. There's no requirement for the licensee to consult local residents prior to applying, despite them claiming to be at the heart of the neighbourhood. There's no requirement for the licensing authority to formally consult local residents during the application. Nor is there any process for informing local residents of the variation, if it's approved, or of any of the conditions attached. By magic, they're supposed to know that they can apply for the licence details and the conditions, despite being given no formal information that the variation's happening. That's my understanding. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding. The reason I'm here today is on behalf of my daughter, who had a note dropped through a letterbox telling her about the variation application. It's only that note that prompted her to make a complaint and got me involved. And yet it's local residents that are going to be most likely to be affected by this. How can that be right? My final observation, prior to some questions that I'd like to ask, is that the conditions that have been set out for the committee, it's possible that most, no, not all, the disruption will be outside the control, direct control of the licensee. So, fighting in the car park, slamming of doors, playing of loud music, dealing in drugs, they're outside the control of the licensee, naturally. So therefore, wouldn't, as I understand it, form a basis for the licence to be withheld. These will happen much more likely after if the licence is extended to 1:30. All of these would be outside the control of the licensee, but magnified by the environment created by the premises. For example, Motorpoint Arena in Nottingham last weekend put on a musical event, and it finished at 10:30, quarter to 11. there was no need to go on to 1:30 in the morning. I don't understand why there's a need for this to happen at the Woodland. Fundamentally, once granted, the extension will be very, very difficult and time-consuming and expensive to revoke. The behaviour not covered by the conditions could not be used as to complain about the licence. If that licence is going to be prevented, it has to happen now. The variation has to be rejected. So some questions I'd like to ask. Why exactly does the Woodlands need to extend its hours? Need, not want, but need. On the Woodlands website, it's called a hotel, which seems to me to be misleading. And it does raise questions about the nature of the establishment. Seems to me they've got an identity crisis. Are they a hotel, a pub, or an entertainment venue? If the licence extension goes ahead, the likelihood is that more drinks will be consumed and behaviour will certainly not get any better. If you look at the website, festooned on the website, which I have to say is not a Woodlands website, it's a website run by Craft Union, which is a website that all of the pubs, all 450 pubs, use. It's festooned with cheap drinks, which is encouraging that sort of behaviour. Indeed, the company that Craft Union is a subsidiary of is Stonegate, and a couple of years ago they were banned from using some adverts that they were using because they were encouraging excessive drinking and were using advertising that was using under 25 people, which is not allowed, and they had to withdraw those adverts. That seems to me to show an ethos of the company, which has been brought into the community and which we will be, and Derby City Council will be, well, to want of another word, will be lumbered with. Is that really what you want to create? Other questions involved, the conditions that are being raised or listed will include monitoring of noise levels. That's supposed to happen now. Clearly, the evidence that these people have brought forward would indicate that the current condition of no noise, this is not ambiguous, it's no noise, is not being met. And yet, how will the council know that? Only through residents. And yet residents aren't given the conditions. They aren't aware of the processes, as I wasn't before I started this investigation the last couple of weeks. What is the noise level if it's not no noise? Is it a subjective judgment being made by somebody who walks around this perimeter? Or is it a decibel reading? And if it breaks that decibel reading, will that be registered? And what happens if the no noise limit is broken? There's no indication of what will happen. Will they close down the event? Will they quieten the event? I have to say that much more likely is there'll be an apology and the event will continue. So residents will still suffer. Could I ask you, all of you, would you honestly, the representatives of the company, the lawyers, would you move into a house that was next to a pub or a club that was working until drop out at 1:30 in the morning? I suggest you wouldn't. And I also indicate that my daughter didn't. When she applied, there was not a 1:30 cut-off point. If this goes ahead, I think you'll find that the more residents now know about these conditions and the processes involved. We've already had one example of a complaint that seems to have got lost, but there's a danger that the council will be inundated with complaints. That's going to be more time-consuming, more expensive, and more tiresome for the council, for the company, and for residents. I would urge you to dismiss this variation. Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, I'm just going to ask Anne to clarify the process that you questioned in the beginning, if that's all right. What happens when we get an application for a variation?
Thank you. Yes, when we receive a variation application, the applicant has to put a public notice somewhere on or near to the premises to display the terms of the variation application in this case. There is a requirement for them to put an advert in the local paper. In our case, it's the Derby Telegraph, to advertise the very same information, and then that information does go on to the council's website.
Thank you, Anne. Just briefly.
The point about that is that it requires proactive measures by the residents to find out about that. The notice in the pub is about an A4 size, blue as I understand it. The notice in the paper, if somebody doesn't take that paper or doesn't read it, that particular section, it's lost in the ether. There would be nothing as a...
We take this on board, but this is the process, and the process was followed, and that's all that matters.
Sorry, I accept that, and I accept that there's a legal process that's required, but that surely is a minimum process. The council could exceed the minimum. Thank you.
The requirements I've mentioned are actually laid out quite clearly in the Licensing Act 2003. To do anything more than that, we would be acting illegally as a licensing authority.
I'm not going to offer anything else because I'm total agreement. We live opposite, and the noise coming from the smoking area, which we've complained in the past. We've phoned the police. We've had local council officials, visitors, and you must have this in the past. You must have this as a record, surely, because we've had council officials round. It's been dreadful. The smoking area is a party time. Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays. Always has been and still is. It's littered. It's got, you can see where drugs have been thrown on the floor, where they've been smoked. You can smell it. Surely the landlord and the landlady must know. There's illegal drinking going off. There are always cans and bottles outside. We know this because we pick it up. They don't. And nothing seems to happen, and never has for the since lockdown, when they changed the landlady, and then they changed her again because she was doing nothing. And now we've got music. Music in a local pub. That was the 70s. Where? Even in the city centre, people don't have acts anymore. And now we've got a sports bar in the middle of a residential area. There's only one in the city centre. We've got other pubs round us. Have they got sports bars? We've got the Mark Eaton. There's no sports bar there. We haven't got it. And I'm afraid, and I don't know the folk, they can't control it. You can't control a drunk, and you can't control more than one drunk. And the noise at night, late at night, is bad enough now. God knows what it's going to be, because you're telling me last orders, they're going to be there till 2 o'clock in the morning. We're going to get people transported from the West End, from Mackworth. You're going to get gangs of youths coming up. It's going to be like the Wild West. Thank you.
Sorry, may I ask specifically who have you complained about the noise nuisance and how many times in the past? Who have you been sending your complaints to exactly?
We rang the police. My wife contacted the local MP, who got involved. So, yes, we have. The unfortunate thing, I didn't realise that my complaint had to come into the licensing. Never realised that unless I did that, it meant nothing, because you knew nothing about it. So now you have to listen to us moaning and complaining about... I drank in that pub from 1987. There was nothing. It was a pub. And we used to drink in there, and when we used to go home, we didn't urinate in somebody's garden. We weren't fighting. We weren't drunk. We were happy. But now, it's all a hell. The place has changed in the last 5 years, 6 years. Before that, it was okay. It was all right. But it's got worse and worse and worse. And my other thing is, if you would put this through, because, you know, none of you live in Allestree, you put this through, and I'll guarantee you'll have every licensee in Derby, Chad, Mackworth, Sinfin, you name it, going, if they can have it, we'll have it. You'll have absolute war every Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Thank you.
Hi, John Vickers. I'm a local resident, live 2 doors towards the back end of the pub. Similar theme to the comments that have already been made, but I think for me, I had a couple more points. I think this is a residential community. This pub is sat right in the middle of a residential area. It is not in a town centre. It is not on a high street. It is not in a. We have houses all around the pub that are. You know, the community has an aged population and it's young families with young children, right? That is being disturbed by a significant amount of noise on certain evenings, on school nights, on work days, and that is included in the proposal. This is not an appropriate area to run a pub in that way, in the sports bar, live bands, music, as explained already by a couple of colleagues. It's affecting the well-being of the community. And this is, as the gentleman next to me just said, has been happening for years and years and years. The extension will make it worse. Fact. As it's been pointed out, people will drink longer, people will continue to consume alcohol over a period of time. It's a known fact that behaviour deteriorates when that happens. So therefore, us as residents will incur the negative outputs of that fact. We are already seeing and experiencing significant noise when people leave the pub. We are woken up by shouting, car doors, swearing, often violence in certain situations. And in fact, my children, who have been teenagers in the past, have been afraid to walk past the pub at certain times of the day. That is not effective in a community area. Extending the licensing hours will make that worse. The one concern I've got is attracting people outside of Allestree. It should be a community pub. Opening longer hours, where, as the gentleman said, other pubs do not in surrounding areas, will drive people into Allestree to drink for extended hours in a community pub in a residential area. That is wholly inappropriate and will wholly affect the well-being of me as a resident in the area and the community. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong thing to do, 100%. So I agree with the gentleman's comments. I'm aware of what they're trying, the process is. I'm fine with that. I am stating that this is wholly inappropriate for the area that this pub is based in. And I think you've got evidence of aggression, fighting, all sorts of issues that have taken place. We've all witnessed it. We've all been stood on the street at 1 o'clock in the morning looking at it and witnessing it. Completely inappropriate. We have all complained. We've all complained. I have complained to the police. I've complained to the councillors. Some of them are in the room today. I've complained to, I think I've spoken to a local police community liaison officer who's been around. We've complained to the pub. We've complained to everybody that, as residents, without knowing the legality in the process, to everybody that we think we should be complaining to. And we will continue to do that whilst we experience this type of behaviour. So I strongly urge you to consider the community element in this decision. It's completely inappropriate that this licensing now gets extended past what they've already got. In fact, I would actually say I disagree with the licensing hours they've already got. I know that's not on the table today, but we are experiencing these issues within the licensing hours they've got today. Thank you.
Thank you. Switch your microphone off.
Good morning, Tim Rosier, local resident. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I want to make two broad points really, one about reasonableness and one about impact. In terms of reasonableness, I think there's a danger with these things that those that object can be seen as a minority of killjoy, whinging neighbours who are small-minded. And I've seen comments to that effect on social media. But I think you've seen an outpouring of emotion and frustration today. But what I would highlight is that the 22 objections are from a range of people, including myself. So I'm a family man, others with kids, others families. There are those that are housebound and elderly, and there are those that are of working age and have to get up at various times. There's a range of different neighbours. This is not just one or two small-minded individuals. And they've been able to make the representations of which I know you've had sight of. I think the other thing, though, is that I myself also bought a house knowing it was next to the pub, but I knew the previous owner, and for many, many years, things were okay. You have to expect a degree of noise if you live next to a pub, and that is not an issue. As a dad of 4 kids, obviously, I'm used to noise. But this is about the level of noise and the impact that it has and the time of day, which is what's changed. And I think you're hearing that things have changed over time. In the time that I've lived there, things have changed. And so now, actually, residents that I speak to, including myself, would consider ourselves battle-weary of these noise and frustrated by the impact that it's having. I'm surprised at the lack of representation by Derbyshire Constabulary. I would urge you to consider that no representation from the police is not necessarily a sign that nothing's happened, and I think you've heard that. In fact, I'm very surprised, and you will have seen the video that I sent in of police drawing tasers and making arrests of an affray on Christmas Day last year, which woke us up, woke my 2-year-old up, as she was then. And so that will be on record. So I'm surprised that the police have made no representations when in fact they have had involvement. And there was a period of time as well where the public protection team of Derby City Council, in partnership with the police, undertook a door knocking and are in the local area under the previous licensees, and the licence conditions were curtailed for a period of time due to the excessive things. Now, I recognise the licensees have changed, and on the table is some changes, but you have to recognise that this is a sense in which the local community are battle-weary and not necessarily cognisant of where to take their frustrations. When I've tried to ring the police a number of times, we recognise that public services are stretched. It's not necessarily a 999 call in terms of a danger to life, but on ringing 111 instead, the reality is you can be waiting for up to an hour just for the phone to be answered, and therefore going into the middle of the night. So the problems then is, where do you take it? And I have spoken as well to councillors, public protection, the police and others. So it's not that people aren't complaining. In terms of the impact, though, I think it's important to highlight, and you will have had sight of the letters from a range of people, including myself. I consider myself a reasonable chap. I'm not here to say that there should be no noise, but this is about appropriateness. The extension of the licensing conditions to the hours that it are would then push it to the point where actually we are in the deepest part of our sleep. This is not just about when we are going to bed, roughly, and we're putting up with a bit of noise for 15, 20 minutes, but it's at a time during our sleep cycles that's at the deepest. And there have been times when my wife, who works in the NHS, has been woken up and it's affected her mental well-being and her mental health due to frustrated and broken sleep, and has an impact on her as a parent and as an employee. And myself as well has been woken up at times. I always seek to build rapport and relationship with my next door neighbours as licensees. I've enjoyed good relationships over the years. Most recently, I did go in and speak to the gentleman here at the front. I got dressed again and when I was woken up by the bands, and my wife was woken up and 2 of my children were woken up, to go and have a chat. Very polite, no disrespect, respect him as a human being. I was ultimately, though, thanked and apologised to, but ignored. The music continued. So the issue is then around a number of things. The impact of music, live music, and the bass frequency in live bands at a time is so loud that it wakes us up. And I measured on my decibel meter over 90 decibels at my bedroom window with it most recently. That's where it's at. What, though, is the main issue is around antisocial behaviour and criminality. Well, you already hear that it attracts various people. And the key thing for me is that the extension of the licensing hours and pushing it the times that it will attract those who have finished in other establishments to then come to the Woodlands to finish off their night. So as well as increased traffic, it's attracting drinkers coming from other places in various states. You will have seen accounts of, and indeed seen videos of, antisocial behaviour and criminality that affects our sleep and our well-being, and so on. And I would urge you to revisit those, and I'm happy to clarify any of those particular circumstances that I highlight. For me, though, the concern I have is when my kids get woken up and naturally get drawn to the bedroom window and what they witness and have seen over time. And I've had to kind of take them away and said, look, go back to bed, don't worry, Daddy's dealing with it. But they have seen, drunken people fighting, as you've seen on the video. In the past, they have seen drug taking, drug dealing, and so on, out the window. All done when those that have attracted to the area, it changes kind of the vibe. For me, it's about being able to enjoy my private property and lifestyle in peace, free from impact. And that's true for both me and my wife, but also for my children. And the impact that it has on my children's mental health and well-being and sleep is clearly of a concern to me. Also, in terms of prevention of antisocial behaviour and criminality, I can't see how the extension of the licensing time will curtail or reduce that. It will only increase it by the attraction of other people, the extended time that people will drink, and the obvious impact that it will have on their inebriation. So I noticed that there are conditions put forward within the application to seek to mitigate some of the risks, but my argument is that they don't address all of the risks that are actually of concern to the residents. I note there's with the issue with noise is seeking to be addressed by walking around the perimeter and so on. But my question is will that actually happen given my experiences over the years? For me, it's about the antisocial behaviour and the attraction of people and the dispersal at kicking out time. So your choices today, if you do decide to accept but modify conditions, I urge you please to take on board the issues around noise, antisocial behaviour and criminality, and the fact that actually people are unhappy with the existing ones. I would urge you to consider a noise meter, extra measures around noise, and also but to take into account perhaps that the licensing time is inappropriate for community. My representation, though, is that you reject this proposal in full for the reasons that I've outlined. I'm here to support. I support local businesses, and I want people to kind of be able to enjoy themselves. The issue, though, is about the time of day and the impact that it has on well-being, sleep, and my children. And as any good dad would do, I want to speak up for my children's welfare. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll switch your microphone off. Sorry, I can't see. So you've mentioned a couple of times the videos that we have all been sent. So if we will play them, but if I may just take Councillor Hassel's up because he's the last one, and then we'll play the videos after, if that's okay. So if I can take Councillor Hassel.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to support everything that's been said today by the residents in attendance. And anecdotally, as a local member, I can attest to the amounts of complaints that have been received over a number of years for this establishment. And that ranges from, as has already been said, about drug taking, sexual activity in the car park, noise, antisocial behaviour, all of which have been collated and submitted to the police. And it's a big frustration that the police have not put forward any sort of reasonable representation on this matter, because they are well aware of the issues that have been happening over a number of years in and around this location. But I think, as has already been mentioned, this is about appropriateness. It is a community pub in a community setting, surrounded by residential houses. And I would be interested to know if there is a precedent for any other establishment in a similar setting that has got hours of this nature extended to 1 in the morning over the weekend period, because I think it is likely that if there is no other establishments with these operating hours, it will attract people out of area and cause even further nuisance. This is a local pub. It's not a city centre pub. It's not built or designed or situated to accept further noise, further drinking, further nuisance in this location. I think what needs to happen here is that clearly, and has already been said, neighbours do not feel that this establishment is a good neighbour. And I don't think extending these hours will help in any way to alleviate that. I think work needs to happen to become that good neighbour and part of the community and work with neighbours. But I think by extending hours is just going to exacerbate the problems further and will create issues, not just for residents and primarily for those, but for the police, licensing colleagues, etc. It's wholly inappropriate to extend these hours. It needs to deal with its business with the hours already set. I think no one here is anti-pub. I think most people enjoy a good pub and promote local pubs and businesses. That's not the question here. It's about this establishment proving its worth in the community, acting responsibly, and not adding to issues that are clearly already on the table. I would strongly urge colleagues who are deciding this matter to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hassett. So can we play the videos, please, Jackie?
Excuse me, Chair, sorry to interrupt. These folks here, due to the delay to the start, they only put 2 hours on their car park, and it's about to come to an end. So I think my neighbours here need to go. But,
You're happy to go whenever you want to, basically.
They're going to go and put some more money on the parking and come back.
We need to delay the hearing.
It is a public meeting, so you are quite okay to come back and
You can
sit
come
in
back
the
in the room.
Sorry, before you leave, could I just take your full name, please, just so I can record it on my notes?
Is there any sound?
So, that's part of the issues we've been having. So what we will do is that's streamed through YouTube, and then I think Jackie's going to play from her laptop to get the sound after. If that's the only way we could figure of doing it.
Everybody has received a link to that particular video anyway, so everybody in the room has heard it.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask that we establish when this video was taken, time of day and date, please?
Yes, that was an issue, that there was no time or date stamp on.
Chair, the name of the video had the date in it. It was Christmas Day last year, 25th of December 2023.
Is there a time stamp on it?
Christmas morning, so it was about midnight on Christmas Day, so Christmas Eve into Christmas Day. It was midnight on Christmas Day 2023.
If everybody has seen and heard the videos, yeah.
For your information, that was taken in the last week at about 10 o'clock at night. I don't know which day, but it was 10:30, I think, at night by my daughter. Not that one, the one that's not been shown.
Okay, thank you.
I can confirm from Ms Stevenson it was the 6th of December at 10:15 at night.
Are there any timestamps or date stamps on the actual video, or is it just a verbal evidence?
Ms Stevenson, when I asked her, she confirmed it was by email that it was the 6th of December at 10:15 at night.
I don't think we're going to be able to get the second one to play, but so we're just confirming that everybody's seen it and heard it in the room. Okay. Okay. Any questions? Okay. So now I will move on to the applicant for to make their representations. And we are going through yourself, Mr. Green, is that correct? Thank you.
Good morning all. I'll just very quickly touch upon, because most of the comments were covered in my submissions, but just a couple of bits and bobs I'll just quickly cover before I forget. Yeah, we saw the video. The video was a year ago after the pub had closed, and there was the chap on the phone from a week or two back. Yep, seen those. So police-wise, yeah, we checked with the force inspector who specifically checked all their records and their systems as far as the last 12 months. They had 2 and one of them was the one that we've just been made aware of, which was after closing a year ago. I'll cover the police in my submissions. Just one thing I'd like to add, Chair. We keep hearing about the legitimate concern of whether people will be coming to this site later, coming from elsewhere later on, and I fully respect the residents' opinions on that. What is quite common in these situations, and we're happy to offer it up, if the variation is granted, is the standard no entry, re-entry clause, basically, which is a condition that states that after midnight, no entry, re-entry into the pub. So you basically can't just rock up at 12:40 and attend the site. So that goes some way to hopefully alleviating that concern. So I'll just whiz through my submissions, if that's okay, in 3 parts. Firstly, I'll tell you about the applicant and the application. Secondly, I will demonstrate how the application meets the licensing objectives. And lastly, I will talk a bit about the resident representations received. So, Craft Union Pub Company, very experienced operators with 600 plus premises nationwide. Recently won the accolade of Community Operator of the Year award at the Publican Awards. Craft are part of, as we've heard already, part of the large Stonegate Pub Company with over 4,000 pubs in the country. Very responsible national operator. The Woodlands is an integral community-led local. It's been thriving since Craft took over the pub circa 18 months ago. The new operators, Kelvin and Penny, have worked wonders with the pub in a short space of time. Very experienced publicans have run Craft Union pubs in Nottingham and Long Eaton with great success, decent relationships with authorities and usually with their neighbours. Over the 18 months, they've changed the demographic of the pub. It's a community pub filled with local people enjoying a drink, some occasional entertainment, a game of pool with pool leagues, etc. The extra hour is in response to the locals wanting to be able to stay in their local without the need to travel off into town, etc. later on. As an aside, I have been shown a number of emails and letters sent into the pub supporting this application from their regulars. Kelvin and Penny organised a very successful charity night in September for Rainbow's Hospice, raising nearly £1,500. The pub was packed, singers, karaoke, etc. No issues whatsoever. Just on the point of karaoke, I note that the last karaoke they had, I think, was January this year, and apart from one night of charity, they don't do karaoke. They've run tens successfully for events such as boxing with later hours, no issues whatsoever. The main part of the application is to extend the licenceable hours for the sale of alcohol, late night refreshment, if anybody has any concerns about late night refreshment, coffee, tea, etc. Thursday to Saturday, just for 1 hour from midnight to 1 AM. The indoor sporting element, again, just in case anybody's wondering, it's because they run a very successful pool league and they run pool events at the pub. It's an integral part of what they do. What is, however, very important, and just to make it very clear in case anybody was still wondering, we are not touching music, because and I'll touch upon this later when I talk about the letters and so. We're not touching live music, recorded music, karaoke. None of that is changing here whatsoever. There will be no later music as part of this application. This is not about music. Music is not included in the application. So, how do we meet the licensing objectives? Well, as my client is a responsible and very large operator, they liaised fully with the experts in advance, environmental health, police, etc., to check to see they were happy with the application prior to submission and what they could do to reduce any issues or alleviate any existing problems if there are any. Both the police and the environmental health noise experts checked their records and confirmed they had no fundamental issues with the application. What they both did, however, was suggest some brand new conditions to replace the very old conditions that were on the licence. These were agreed very quickly, and you've got them in your bundles, so you've seen the comprehensive conditions. For sake, I won't go through them all, obviously, but you've got full comprehensive CCTV, including the car park, incidents, refusal logs, monitoring, clearing of outside areas to ensure noise levels are kept to a minimum, notices asking patrons to leave quietly with consideration for the neighbours, strict challenge 25, a noise management plan that covers the whole area of dispersal and noise for the local residents, the DPS to respond and deal with any complaints that are received, noise checks outside the premises if entertainment is taking place, windows and doors to be kept closed during entertainment, etc. These conditions are vitally important, and it is essential that the residents who have objected are aware of these, as they relate specifically to their areas of concern, i.e. noise and nuisance. So, Onto the representations, I would ask you to consider the representations against the backdrop of the fact that there have been no representations whatsoever from any of the responsible authorities. I'd also like to highlight that the applicant and the local operator have received about 3 complaints since they took over the pub over 18 months ago. I believe 2 of those are from a gentleman who lives adjacent to the pub. They relate to things like a car in the car park where there was playing music loudly in a car, the noise from the band, I think we've heard about that from, respectfully, from one of the chaps at the back, and an argument outside between 2 men. 2 of those occasions, I think people were barred, the vehicle was dispersed, and if people take complaints, usually to the DPS, the landlord, landlady, they will do everything they can to deal with them. I'll very quickly just pick out some material points from the representations, if that's okay, Chair. Loud music, late night entertainment, nightclub hours. Well, the residents are concerned. They don't expect to have a late night club imposed on them. Well, Craft Union do not run nightclubs or late night dance venues. They run community pubs. Any regulated entertainment they do is policed, and we have, as discussed already, agreed conditions with the noise experts and the EHO relating to noise escape at the property. But as has just been highlighted, we are not changing the hours here. We're not touching hours for music. Or live music, recorded music today, so these will not change. So we have fighting and drug taking, etc. Well, I would say that, respectfully, if there were incidents of regular fighting and drug taking on a regular basis, and it was known to relate to these specific premises, I think the police would have objected and would be sat here today. As part of our conversations with the police, they confirmed they'd received only 2 call-outs in the last 12 months, and as I've just said, one was relating to the police incident, and they've had no call-outs or no issues in the last 6 months at all. So let's have a look. The other call-out, I believe, that was on record was the report, an allegation that somebody had seen a drunk driver, but they were not located. Nobody knew where this car was. So when the objectors refer to issues of crime and disorder at the premises, their information is either historical and before the current owner's tenure or incorrect, according to the experts, the police. We hear that there have been numerous issues with the pub over the years. Well, with respect, we're concerned with how the premises have been run by the applicants in the last 18 months since they took over the ownership, and with the new operators in situ. And according to our records and those of the responsible authorities, there have been very few issues over this period. We have seen that a video has been produced of an incident a year ago, and that's it. There are many references to increases in traffic. Well, with respect, as the committee will know, traffic issues are not included in licensing law. Using the outdoor seating area for this later period will cause disruption to local residents. Well, if you look at the conditions, you'll see that there is a condition preventing the outside areas being used after 11 p.m, save for smokers. So notwithstanding all of this, as has already been covered, the new conditions on the premises licence, as agreed with the experts, should prevent any issues happening in the future. Those are my submissions on behalf of the applicant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? So I've just got a couple of questions, if I may. So, I don't know who can answer this, to be fair. The video that we have just seen, do we know who rang the police on that occasion?
Penny,
yeah.
Nobody. The police was actually driving past as it broke out. We'd actually closed, the pub had been closed for half an hour. The people who'd been in the pub had actually left the premises. Apparently they'd come back and met up with somebody on the car park. The fight broke out just as the police car was driving past, so yeah.
The other thing that you mentioned was an offer of a no entry time. Could you be more specific with that time, please?
Of course, Chair. I would suggest that midnight would be fair, because that means that the additional, if granted the additional hour, people wouldn't be coming in after the current people are there. It would just simply be people who are already in the premises. So I would offer up midnight as a no entry, re-entry time, if that's okay with you, Chair.
And do you have a current no entry time, or is it just until?
Yeah, there's no need for any re-entry clause at the moment.
Thank you. So the other question I had, but I think you've answered, was how long the present DPS has been in place. So that's 18 months, is that correct? Could you explain to us why you want this extra hour, why it's needed?
Excuse me, sorry. We still have a lot of local residents that do come in the pub and enjoy the pub to the point that they've been working hard all week and they want to come in and meet up with all their friends, and they'd like a later drink because a lot of them do go downtown and they only end up going down for an hour, and they say, oh, I've had to pay all this tax fare and this, or it would be lovely if we could just stay here for another hour. And so for them, yes, we'd really like to extend the hours because they're the ones that come in 5 to 7 days a week and enjoy the place. So.
So it's not for any specific reason, any event or anything like that. It is just you just want to extend the hours.
I think, if I may, I think Thursday is the pool league. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do have a pool team on a Thursday. They play Thursday night. It would be nice, like especially if they've played away, for when they come back, so that they can, you know, have a drink, as well help the pub recap some money that it's lost because they've played away. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. And could you offer me any thoughts on the residents' complaints, the residents' concerns behind all of this? So, for instance, we've heard a submission that somebody came to see you to complain about the noise, and you were very apologetic but yet did nothing. Could you tell me how you would operate in the future with that in mind?
Yeah, speaking to the gentleman, I did apologise to him, and I was very grateful that he had come in to see me. I did explain to him that the band had got one more song to do, which they did, and that was it. But moving forward, with us having the later licence, we can then put them on earlier, because we will lose it. If we put them on earlier, we lose customers to downtown because, you know, we're shutting early, and that's been historically a problem. So we put them on that little bit later, so there was something for them to stay in for, and then there was less likely to go downtown. I mean, if they were going down, they were going down anyway, but we're not going to be looking into playing music as late. Obviously, with this extension, we have to be that little bit more respectful anyway. So, yeah, I think that's right.
So, your concerns were for your business model rather than the residents, is what you've just kind of said. So, what did you offer the resident in that situation?
I did say to them that they were going to shut it down within I don't know, between 5 and 10 minutes it was done. So yeah, I did say that they were just finishing off, and then that would be it.
The worst part with that situation, we had got a pub full of people, so it was a case of we'd already told the band they'd got to stop even before the gentleman came in. We'd got a room full of people, more. If we'd said to them this was the last one, it was better to let them just play that one song rather than let the pub turn nasty. It was easier to do that, and then we shut it down and we got rid of everybody, and that was the way we had to do it that night. That band was not a normal type of band that we have. We don't normally have bands like that. It was an unknown entity to us, yeah.
And just to jump in, Chair, if that's okay, the issue with bands and noise and nuisance and EHO, etc., are covered in detail in the new conditions, and there is even a condition in there about the DPS responding to complaints. And, you know, residents committee, residents meetings, you know, these things are things that can be arranged if necessary to improve any relations, if there are any need for any improvements. Have resident meetings on site on a periodic basis. They're the sort of things that we've seen in other pubs that work very well.
Sorry, are we allowed to add anything further at any point? Or
1 minute after.
Thank you.
When I offer it. So, do you have currently any provision, any way of residents contacting you? Do you have a phone number that you provide for residents that they can ring you up to save them getting dressed and walking around and coming into your pub?
Well, we've got the Facebook page, but we can set that up if you want. They can access you through Facebook.
Happy for
The
that
pub
to be,
hasn't got a landline. That's the, yeah.
happy to set something up as a condition, so there is some sort of formal line of communication. Chair, no problem with that whatsoever.
There used to be a phone line, and I used to be able to phone, but that got disconnected. Sorry, forgive me. There used to be a landline phone, but I note that the landline no longer works.
So a mobile number for the DPS would be acceptable. Yeah.
So for the DPS mainly, how many complaints have you received in the past 18 months with regards to noise, nuisance, or other things, ASB?
Face to face, I've had 3 complaints in the last 18 months. Any others that's been made have not been made to me, or I haven't been made aware of. So other than those 3, I've no idea.
I just had a question for myself. We heard from a couple of the residents today about their concerns about them having to go out in the middle of the night to disperse vehicles or clear up litter. Do you have any comments about that?
I don't understand where it's come from, because there is no dispersal of vehicles. Most of the time, the only time our car parks are rammed with cars is at school time, and that's because of the mums using the car park there, picking up the kids from school. There's hardly any cars in our car park, so why they're having to come in to disperse them, I don't understand. I don't get where that's come from.
Do you have currently a noise management plan in place?
Not currently, no, but in consultation with the EHO pre-application, that was something that they requested. We've put that together and we've got that in as a condition of the licence as well, so that we must operate under a noise management plan.
It would have been helpful if we could have seen sight of that at this meeting, to be fair.
Okay, I will endeavour to get
you.
that to you. I might be able to get that in your adjournment, and then I'll be able to give it to you. Thank you.
The other thing that was mentioned in the conditions from the police were that the outdoor areas were to be cleared at 11 o'clock. Currently, I'm not hearing that that's happening. So, apart from somebody going out for a cigarette, then that area should not be open beyond 11 o'clock for people to sit and drink.
This has been one of the things that they've put forward to put in place. This is not in place at the minute. We've never had that restriction before, that they can't be out after 11 o'clock.
So you will be...
We will be implementing that,
going forward. So
yeah, going
the
forward,
outdoor...
other than the smoking shelter. Yeah.
Do you currently have CCTV?
Yeah, we do. And it's very good CCTV. Covers the pub and most of the car park.
So it goes to the outdoor area as well. Does it cover the outdoor area where people are going to smoke? And yes, so it covers all those areas. That's all I've got, I think. So.
Some businesses, they get the extension, but they don't use it. Sorry.
We wouldn't necessarily be using it every... we wouldn't necessarily be using it every time. It's just there in case we need it. It's just there in case the resident wants it. The Thursday one, it is just there in case the poor lads do want to have a night. More often than not, it won't be used. Again, the Friday, Saturday one, if there isn't, you know, enough people in, we're not going to open that late. It is just it's for the residents. If they want a late drink, we can offer it them.
It's just providing flexibility, councillor, that's all.
Have you had, just to discuss that, have you had any informal consultation with the people who made representation about this? Have you had any communication with them to let your intentions know about this?
We're not on a national level, councillor, because there were so many letters and emails. We liaised, obviously, through the licensing authority, and here was the perfect opportunity to speak, really.
So, just something else I've just remembered. On your application form, where it says how are you going to promote the 4 licensing objectives, under public safety, your answer was, we are aware of the relevant legislation and take our responsibilities seriously. Could you expand on what you mean by that, or how you would do that?
Thank you, councillors. So, yeah, effectively, in relation to public safety, that is not strictly, you know, it's about the fabric of the building and actually that being correctly done. So, obviously, we have all health and safety legislation which we need to adhere to. So, instead of duplicating elements of that into the licence, I think we're guided to avoid duplication under Section 182. That's why that statement goes in. So it's not actually strictly about public safety in terms of violence or those matters. It's about people being safe from the fabric of the building. But we're under legal obligations to uphold, you know, the health and safety legislation and health and safety at work as well.
Sorry, take your question.
I'm a bit bemused. We've been asked, or you're being asked, to extend the licensing hours that won't be used very often, and that's only for a minority of people. And yet the risk is to a relatively small number of people of their sleep being disturbed. It seems to me to be a balance between two small numbers, but I can't see why extending the hours for just a few people, or when they come back from a pool match, it actually warrants the disturbance potential for the local residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. I mean, I've not heard anything from the landlords to justify why they want to do this, other than profiteering from the business. There's no reason to extend these licensing hours. The other issue I've got with some of the responses is some of the controls that are being put forward by the brewery and the landlord. Controls are only effective if they are effective. How are you going to take people? There's about 50 to 60 seats outside the pub, in the front and at the back, benches and all sorts. If people are sitting there, how are you going to move people on? It's not effective. How are you going to walk the perimeter of the premises and monitor that? Ineffective. There's no control. That control does not work. The controls are only effective if they're effective. The other point I think was made is, you know, there are a number of people drinking outside the pub today after 11 o'clock. They're not smoking, they're drinking. So that control is ineffective today, and what you're proposing to do is extend it. You know, you had a pub full of residents. We had a complaint about the noise, and you found it troublesome to stop that noise level because you had a rowdy crowd who were demanding more. I think you've just hit the nail on the head. You have troublesome participants that you cannot control. You've just exacerbated the point to me that reinforces the need to stop the extension of this licence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, there is no current condition for the 11 o'clock in the outside. This is something that we have offered up to prevent what the gentleman has said has been happening previously. There will be, if granted, the condition will state that people are not allowed to drink after 11. That's the point of the new condition. And as far as kind of effective management, well, it's the same with any establishment. If you have an effective management system in place, they do clear out the areas. They do challenge 25. They do check the toilets for drug taking. They do all of the things that you would expect from a responsible publican. And so saying, well, how can these things happen? Well, look at many, many, many very well-run pubs across the whole country. That's what happens when you have decent people running decent establishments. They do what they're expected to do, and they do what's on their premises licence conditions, because they know that the repercussions of not doing what the conditions say are pretty strict. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, the clarity on the police conditions is that what happens is all the responsible authorities get this application, and they can either make representations or they can make conditions. So what the police have done here is go and speak to the pub, and they have agreed and signed these conditions with the police. So the licensing manager from Stonegate has signed it. Is that yourself? Yeah. So that is in agreement with the police that all of these conditions will now be enforced if this licence is granted. So therefore, the police will monitor this going forwards. It's not for us as a licensing authority to monitor it, because they're not our conditions, they're the police conditions that have set. So if that just provides a bit more clarity. Oh, everybody's got their hand up. Anne, yes.
I can just clarify that it's a joint effort. It's ourselves as the licensing authority. We would enforce some of those conditions. We would enforce all of them, but the police do enforce as well. So it's both of us. Okay.
So somebody from licensing has agreed those conditions with the police, or?
No, it's the police. I believe they spoke, the applicant spoke to both the police and environmental protection before they put the application in, and these were suggested conditions which they've agreed to. They are police agreed conditions, but they go on the licence. So the licence is issued by the licensing authority, of which we enforce as a licensing authority.
So it would be our environmental protection officers that would be enforcing alongside the police?
We would enforce the conditions, yeah. If there was an issue with any of the conditions and the police were aware, they could enforce as well, or they could pass it back to us and we would enforce.
Yes, thank you.
That raises the question about who's going to monitor it. Is it going to be the licensee holder? Is it going to the police, which I doubt? Is it going to be the licence authority, which I doubt? It'll be down to residents. And the other thing is, when we're monitoring noise, the condition, as I understand it, is no noise. That's quite unequivocal. If it's no noise and that condition is broken, how will that actually be put into place if a phone call is made or a complaint is made? Will they stop the activity going on? Well, we've already had an explanation that would cause problems. I don't see how this is A, monitored and B, enforced. Thank you.
Thank you. As I've just said, the conditions will be enforced by both the police and our environmental team. Obviously, action is only taken on a complaint. So you say, oh, it's up to us, but it kind of is, because without any complaints, there's no problem, and nobody knows that there's a problem. We need to know that there's a problem. I didn't know that there was a problem at this pub prior to reading these papers, for instance.
So is it the licensing authority or the police?
Both.
I'll jump in, Chair, if that's okay. It depends on the problem. If it's a crime and disorder issue, it's the police. If it's a noise and nuisance, it's environmental health, or generally the licensing authority. There are many means of complaint available.
then could that be written down and communicated to residents so that at least they would know the processes involved?
See, if there are constant complaints, you can go even through your local councillors to raise a license request, a review request. Am I right, Anne?
I think it's a wider issue as well here. Right? We are stating where our opinion, and obviously there's varying opinions in the room, we should also look at the broader environment within Derby Council, because I understand the points you're making, and we as residents have the right to complain through the right authorities. That will happen, which will create strain on public resources. There will be numerous complaints on what's advocated in that paper around noise and disturbance to the police on a regular basis, to the local council and to the licensing committee. The residents, and we represent a small group of those residents who have strong opinions on this, will be undertaking that on the basis if this is approved, and we would strongly advise it isn't, and it would lead to a stretch and strain. We've already called out well-being of the community. We will not just accept the position that is in place today and the impact that it's having on us as a community. We will not accept it. It will create a strain on public resources.
So the position as it stands is that if any licence that's granted can be taken away, it can be offered for a review. The police can call in a review at any time, and I've done a few of those in my time. And also the licensing authority can also bring in a review. So that is the process behind any licence or condition that's granted on any licensing premises, is that a review can be called in if the conditions are not being complied with. And that is the process, unfortunately. Fortunately.
See, the whole process has to revolve around those 4 licensing objectives. So what we have been discussing. So any decision taken by the committee would be based on those 4 licensing objectives. Thank you.
Okay, if we've got no further questions, sorry.
So we have to go through, I've just heard what you've been saying. This sounds, I'm not saying you've made your minds up, it certainly seems to be tipping in a different direction. So you grant this, you 3 grant this, and then through due process. How long do we have to suffer the due process before, if you grant it, you go, sorry, we made a mistake? Because it's not going to be you that's suffering. It's us. And so when you finally have all these complaints, I know what you're going to say. I understand you've not made a decision. I'm just going forward.
Said we have, so
I'm just saying to you, it's us that will suffer the due process. No one else. Not the 2 gentlemen at the front on the left-hand side. Us. Thank you.
I was merely answering what happens if it was granted, and at no point have we made our mind up or said that I've made my mind up.
I agree entirely. I'm just putting forward the due process.
Could you put your...
I was just putting forward the due process. There should be no due process. It's as simple as that. Stop it at its source. That's the way you do anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to move on to summing up now. So we'll sum up in the same order that we started with. So Licensing Authority, Anne, please.
Thank you, Chair. To sum up, the application is for an extra hour on the sale of alcohol, late night refreshment and indoor sports only. I would like to reiterate the licensing team has only received 1 complaint concerned with the premises licence or its conditions. We've heard about other complaints being sent into the council. If they were concerned with noise, I can only assume they have been sent to the Environmental Protection Team for investigation. The applicant has agreed conditions together with the police and the Environmental Protection, which negated the need for the police to actually come forward to make a representation because the conditions have already been agreed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Would you all like to sum up individually, or do you want to have a spokesperson?
I think maybe if we just, maybe between us, we could just sum up. I think the gentleman made a really good point. Like, we are, you know, we all frequent these establishments. We all enjoy the benefits that public houses provide. But we want, what we want is it respected within the community. You know, I think you know, if the decision is to grant it and then we follow a process, if it's not working, I would say it's not working today, and therefore the process should not be allowed to move forward in that regard. We're already suffering the consequences, and have been for a number of years, the impacts of the Woodlands pub. You know, I think the well-being, the elderly population, young children in the area, it's just not acceptable. We know that extending the licensing hours will extend drinking. What comes with that is extensional bad behaviour. It is the two are linked. We know that as a fact. I go back to my first point. It's a community. You can see from the video, it's surrounded by houses. It's not surrounded by shops and businesses where potentially a bit of noise and disruption at 1 o'clock in the morning can be passed away. These are people living in their homes day to day. It's completely surrounded by houses. It's just not acceptable to be able to have that level of noise and that level of disruption on Christmas Eve for young children. That's just completely unacceptable in society today and going forward. We should be stamping that sort of behaviour out and completely out of our society. So we strongly believe that extending the licence has no benefit to the pub at all, no benefit to the local people who want to drink in there, because there's a minority of people that will want to undertake that. And we know from previous history that when they've done the events and the hours that they've had, people have come from outside of the area that don't have no disregard for the community, no disregard for the local people that live there, and this will only exacerbate that situation. So I strongly advise that it's declined in full. I don't know if you want to add anything.
At the heart of it is that we want to be able to enjoy our private property and lifestyle in peace and without fear, and that hasn't happened for the various things that we've talked about. I recognise some of the conditions being offered up to that event, but as you will hear, I think the level of emotion is represented in this room and in those letters. And finally, for me, again, I'm going to finish on the thing because I'm a dad of 4 young kids. It's about their protection and well-being, and some of the things that happen that they either witness when they get woken up or they experience seeing out the window are just not appropriate. And so as a dad, I'm going to stick up for my kids.
Just further to my point about what are the relative benefits to the pub against the losses to the community, I'd also like to add that the monitoring process is still yet to be established. How is the no noise going to be measured? Is it going to be with decibel meters or just a feeling? And finally, the number of complaints, I would suggest, are few, more because of the process that's involved and the lack of knowledge by the local residents rather than the disruption caused. If you want to contact the police at that time of night, first of all, you've got to feel that it's a big enough event, like a fight, to bring them in. Somebody urinating in your garden isn't going to bring it in. Somebody slamming doors, somebody shouting, you're not going to call the police for that. It wouldn't be any good telling the licensing authority because they won't be open till next day. So you're left with a situation where what do you do? That's the dilemma that residents have faced. It will be what's been faced, and it will be what's faced in the future if this extends into the further hours. But residents are now more focused and understanding of what the process is. So I would suggest, as I think has already been suggested, there will be more complaints if this goes ahead.
The conditions that you have, that the police want to impose, will they be inspecting on a daily, weekly or regular basis, going down that list and ticking it off? Or will they only react and check the list when there's a complaint?
Unfortunately, because they're not here, I cannot answer that question on their behalf. So.
And just to finish off from me, I know I've been into the pub at least 4 times, probably more, to complain. I haven't seen that gentleman. I've seen you a couple of times, and I've seen other bar staff who, when I say, there's a row outside last night, the member of staff behind the bar, what he said to me, well, it's difficult to control people when they're drunk. That was his response, and, that I think he's saying we can't control people who are drunk.
Councillor Hassel, for your
My summing up. Thank you, Chair. I think just without going over what's already been said, and it's all very valid, I think from today's session, I'd just like to point out that the comments from the applicant's legal representative I felt were quite dismissive of the residents' concerns and opinions, and they were based purely on desktop evidence rather than real documentary evidence that I receive and they experience. But more so, I think what was concerning was the statement given by one of the licensees, in that the situation in question where someone went in to complain about music, and that the course of action was to allow the music to continue in case, I think the word was, it turned nasty. Gives a little reflection of the clientele that's perhaps attending this establishment. But more so, I think it demonstrates that, sadly, the licensee has no or very little influence on the behaviour of its patrons. And I think adding an additional hour to that in that climate would be foolhardy. And again, I'll just reiterate, I would encourage you to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. So on that note then, that concludes the meeting today.
Applicant.
Oh, sorry, I did this last time. I did exactly the same thing last time. Sorry, it's because there's so many of you in the room. Apologies.
Thanks, Chair. I'll very quickly sum up what we've heard today. Section 9.43 of the Section 182 guidance states that the authority's determination should be evidence-based, something that was brought up in the well-known High Court case of Thwaites. So what is the evidence? Well, no objections or concerns whatsoever from the experts and the primary sources of guidance when it comes to crime and disorder, noise and nuisance, i.e. the police, environmental health. Surely, if this was a problem premise in a problem area, the police, environmental health licensing authority would have objected. This fact should carry considerable weight when determining this application. The premises licence, if the extension is granted, will have many robust conditions on it, as agreed with the experts, and these additional conditions have been added to help to meet the licensing objectives. As long as these conditions are strictly complied with, there'll be no reason for any of the residents to have any cause to complain in the future. We've offered up a no re-entry entry clause at midnight to avoid any issues with regard to people rocking up to the premises late at night. Many of the concerns we've heard from the residents are about noise, in particular music noise, and the concern that an additional hour at the weekends will mean later music. As we've heard on a few occasions, this is incorrect. There would be no change whatsoever to the hours for music if the extension was granted. Many of the other issues raised by the residents seem to be slightly more historical and do not seem to relate to the current operators running the premises. The Woodlands is a well-run community pub run by a very experienced couple with great relationships with the locals who would like to stay in the premises for just one more additional hour, or the flexibility to do so they don't have to travel outside of the area. We're not at a review hearing today. We've mentioned this review thing. We're not at a review. This hasn't been brought to question the existing premise or the existing operators. I will, however, reiterate what's been said on a few occasions on Bayan. Under the Licensing Act 2003, a local resident or anybody can apply to have a premises licence reviewed if at any time after the licence has been granted or varied, matters arise that concern the failure to promote the licensing objectives, crime, disorder, noise, nuisance, etc. I conclude by thanking the committee for its time, and in light of what we've heard today, I invite the committee to grant the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we conclude the meeting. Sorry about that. So the decision notice will be written and sent out by Monday to everybody. Thank you so much for all attending, and apologies again for the delay.
Sorry, before we go, could I just make sure that I have the name of all the residents? I do have the names, but I just can't put the faces to the names, if that makes sense. Could I just start with yours on the end, please? Yeah. Got that one, thank you. And Adrian. And Christopher Limbert at the back. And was it John Vickers? Yeah, you might have it with Joe. Okay, Joe. And Tim Ross, yeah. Thank you.
Chair, when are we going to get to see the video that wouldn't work?